Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 64 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. On this episode, I want to talk a little bit about tools and creativity, or tools and technology and creativity. There's a lot going on out in the photographic world dealing with the tools of photography. Certainly, we are in the midst of this amazing digital revolution, and my bet would be that many people, the vast majority of people who are out there listening to Camera Position and making photographs, are making them with digital cameras. Now, those of you who've been listening along for a long time know that my particular interest in photography, the thing that I'm most intrigued by, is large format cameras and large format black and white photographs and using film and these old technologies. And I got an email from one of the listeners to the podcast, and he was particularly interested in some ideas about this whole notion of film, and I thought it might be worth addressing because it's certainly a topic that comes up for anybody who is using the older technology of film photography. So I currently shoot medium format, he wrote, and 6 by 7 centimeters, and I'd like to try large format within the next couple of years. I love medium format, but I see so many advantages other than potential print size that I'd like to explore. And I think some of those advantages that he's talking about are some of the same things that I've talked about with regard to large format photography, the slowing down, the contemplative approach. I even like putting my head under the dark cloth and just sort of escaping from the world and having those distractions of the world go away. But he goes on to say, I know you shoot large format, and I wanted to get your opinion of where you think support for the medium, film and developing, etc., will go in the future. Living in New Zealand, he says, I can see the level of support for the format decreasing ever more. I can also see it becoming more of a specialized format, more so than now, with very limited access to film and developing. My worst case scenario would be if I chose to take up large format, gear is quite cheap at the moment, and that I will have to import the film and possibly export the exposed film for processing. And I'd like to get your opinion on this. Now, I think it's a great question. I think it's a terrific question because it is certainly, kind of goes to the core of what photographers deal with. The fact that our materials sometimes dictate the way in which we work. And certainly we've seen a huge hue and cry, a big uproar over Polaroid discontinuing the manufacture of instant films, and what that's done to a lot of photographers who depend upon that kind of material to do the sort of work that they enjoy doing. What I think is going to happen, at least in the terms of traditional film, black and white, color negative film and processing and equipment, one thing that this writer writes in that I think is really amazingly accurate is that the stuff to make these pictures with is incredibly inexpensive now. For those of us who own these pieces of equipment, it's kind of a daunting thing. Golly, we have these pieces of equipment now that we paid big money for a long time ago, and now it's worth somewhat less. But the great piece of knowledge is that there's a lot of really terrific film equipment available out there in the open market for not much money. And I think one of the things that's going to happen is just that. I think that we're going to see traditional photography turn into a more of a niche market. And I think there are going to be all kinds of great niche players to come into that marketplace and find ways to service those of us who are still interested in practicing photography that way. It may very well be, of course, that we'll pay a little bit more for the privilege of being able to use these materials, and it may be a little tougher for us to get those kinds of things. And it may be tougher outside of some of the major markets of, say, Europe and America, and New Zealand might be a particularly good example of this, someplace that's a little bit more isolated and has a smaller population to serve. And certainly those kinds of things might be an issue. But I do think that what's going to happen is that these kinds of things are going to become more and more important to photographers who continue to work with these kinds of materials. In fact, the department where I teach at College of DuPage in Glen Ellyn, Illinois, we have just recently redone our traditional black and white darkrooms with the belief that that kind of technology is not going to go away. It's certainly not going to go away in terms of the way we use it educationally, and it's really not going to go away in terms of the way photographers want to use it. A very popular course in our program is an alternative photographic processes kind of course where students learn to make platinum and palladium prints and all kinds of other non-traditional 19th and early 20th century processes, and learn about the way in which those things worked back in the day, and the way in which those kinds of processes and materials can be used to craft interesting images that have a particular beauty to them. There's that word again, that is unapproachable by contemporary methodologies. And I also think, in a fairly strong way, and any of you who have been involved in education in photography for any period of time, I think would corroborate this, I also think that learning basic black and white darkroom photography and even learning the intricacies of exposing color transparency film can really help photographers learn how photography works, especially that color transparency film and the way it translates to the digital realm, and how digital exposures and color transparency exposures are very much the same in terms of the tolerances that they have. And black and white photography, boy, there's no substitute for understanding the exposure equation than getting into the darkroom and messing around with those chemicals and finding out how light affects light-sensitive materials. So I really don't think these materials are going to go away. I don't think we're sort of standing on the highest point of the Titanic as it's about to go under. I think that what's going to happen is we're going to find more and more interest in these from a smaller group of people, certainly, but we're going to find more interest in these kinds of technologies over time than we have in the past. So here we are at this sort of threshold, this area where we can use these great materials. We have a lot of material to work with, and lots of different resources. And in fact, I'll put on the cameraposition.com blog some resources that I think some of you may be aware of, but others of you may not be aware of material suppliers and places where you can get equipment and especially light-sensitive materials for the traditional darkroom that you might not be aware of. But I really think that an investment in these kinds of ideas can really help you become a better photographer. And I've heard from a number of you who've gone out and purchased large format cameras and are making photographs like you've never made them before. And large format and medium format cameras can produce these images that really there isn't a way to do in many of the other processes. And it's also really interesting, if you walk around galleries and museums these days, how many photographers of some note are using large format and medium format cameras, sometimes with digital backs on them, but those tools really change the way you perceive your world. So try something different. Try a different tool. Even if it's going out and creating a pinhole camera, a basic box camera with a pinhole for an aperture and a lens, and seeing what you can make with basic photographic technologies that go away from the digital realm. So I really don't think that these things are going away. I think that what we're going to do is be able to embrace them in this new and wonderful world of photography that incorporates all sorts of different creative ideas. Well, thank you for listening to Camera Position, and those of you who have not gotten a chance to take a look at the cameraposition.com blog, you may want to do so. There's some useful links there and some interesting ideas contained in the sidebar, and please feel free to poke around, and if you find something useful, send me a link, and I will take a look and see what we can do to incorporate that into the Camera Position blog. And of course, for those of you who are interested, cameraposition.com t-shirts and mugs and so forth are available as well. I know that there are a few people out there wearing those things and wearing them proudly, so thank you for those of you who've gone out and spread the Camera Position word. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Camera Position is a proud member of the Photocast Network, your photo resource in the potosphere. photocastnetwork.com